Hi there, I'm Vern Yip. Welcome to my house in Atlanta. Come on in.
Vern, thank you so much for having us here, your beautifully appointed home in Atlanta. Not only do we get to share your gorgeous house with our audience, but we get to talk about your new book, Color, Pattern, Texture.
Yes, well, you're always welcome. You know that. And I'm just so glad we have such a pretty day for you. This is like one of the nicest times of the year in Atlanta.
It really is. You have a gorgeous outdoor space, so we get to sit here and chat, and I loved getting to read the new book, and what a perfect way to discuss it within the context of your house, because you've put all of the insight that you've added into the book about color and pattern and texture, the 3 pillars of design. You've put it all in display in there. So we're gonna use your house as sort of our example, and then, kind of talk about what choices you made inside and why you made them.
Thank you very much for saying that. I'm so excited about the new book. I really think color, pattern, and texture are the most powerful tools that we have to really personalize our home and make it reflective of who we are, to really showcase and share who we are with the rest of the world, but more importantly, to create an environment that rejuvenates and restores you and that really makes it feel like yours. So happy to share my home today. It is full of those things. It's full of color, pattern, and texture. It's very personal. We've designed this home for us, for me, my husband, and our family, and our 6 dogs, and people should use color, pattern, and texture to achieve the same thing in their home, not necessarily to emulate what I've done, but to use the tools in the same way that I've used them to express themselves in their own homes.
Yeah, and I love how in the inside you've kind of like dialed up those 3 different things differently in each room. Some you have a little more texture, some you have a little more color, some you have a little more pattern. So I'm excited to get into all of that. Maybe just start by kind of telling us about the house. You've been here a while because I've seen it in your other 2 books, seen pictures, shots of it here and there. So I know you've been in the house a minute. What brought you here? How has it evolved with you?
We have definitely been in the house for a minute, and I love that. I love a house that you've had a chance to really live in and that has hopefully grown with you. I think that that's super important because it begins to feel like a fitted glove. Like the longer you're somewhere, the more it changes to reflect who you are, the more you can walk through that front door and really feel like, I'm finally home. And it's where the most important moments of your life happen with the most important people. So it should be really unique and special. This house, the original structure was built in 1925. And even though, we live within the city, like we're in the heart of the city, back then this was considered like the countryside of Atlanta, which is hysterical.
Which is hilarious. Yeah, it's hilarious now because you are in the heart of it all.
We're in the heart of it all, and we love this neighborhood. We started by really focusing on the neighborhood because this neighborhood has a great community that really supports families. Your kids are safe here to ride their bikes, and there's a community pool, and there's just a real sense of community here. But aside from that, my husband and I just loved this house the minute that we saw it, and I love old houses. I think there's something really special about imperfections. I think that there's history that you can see in an old house that you just don't get, unfortunately, in new construction. So I love that. So the original house was built in 1925. They did an addition to it in the 40s. And then before our kids were born, we did another addition and then fully renovated the house. So we've been here for a minute.
You renovated everything pre-kids. And do you feel like you made all the right choices? Would you have done anything differently? Has it evolved? Because babies versus you've got now teenagers, very different needs. Would you do anything differently, I guess?
I honestly wouldn't. And you and I were kind of talking about this before. There are so many different parenting styles. Mm-hmm. So I don't necessarily think some are more superior, some are more inferior. It's not about ranking them. It's just that we all parent in really different ways. Mm-hmm. But I remember before our kids were born, many friends coming over and saying, well, you got to give up that coffee table because the kids are gonna like bump into the corner, or you gotta get rid of all the objects that they can touch that are breakable because they're gonna reach them and they're gonna break them. Anything valuable, you gotta like put away. And the thing is, I didn't grow up that way. I grew up with beautiful things everywhere. Because my mom had such an appreciation for beautiful things. It made me really aesthetically sensitive. And I, to this day, still live with so many of those objects I grew up with. But we felt very, very early on like we were gonna raise our kids in a similar way. We were gonna have a beautiful home, and we're gonna teach our kids to respect things. And if something got broken, in spite of those efforts, then it got broken, because at the end of the day, things are just still things. We thought it was just more important for our kids to have the experience of being surrounded by interesting things to look at.
Yeah.
And, even just designing their rooms, we sort of designed them for the long term. Our kids' rooms weren't designed to just last like the first 3 or 4 or 10 years of their lives. Our kids' rooms are the same as when they were born. Their nurseries are converted into now teenage bedrooms. And it's nice. It's nice to see that it actually worked, that they were able to grow with those rooms. And, we've said to them throughout the years, anytime you want to change things, you can, of course, because I think it's important for children to have a say, when they start voicing an opinion and saying, you know what, I really hate the color of this room. I think life is too short to live with the color that you hate. Yeah. But they have both loved their rooms and they've grown with them, and so they're still the same.
I remember, I think in the very first podcast we did with you, you were telling a story, I'm pretty sure, about your mom letting you design your bedroom furniture.
Yep.
And you took, and like, I think you still had it at the time. Maybe maybe it's in storage somewhere, but she gave you full autonomy, even at a young age, to like go do what you wanted to do.
Absolutely.
It sounds like you've done the same for your kids, at least.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I don't know that either one of our kids is going to follow in my footsteps, that they're that interested in design. But they at least have grown up with it. And we've given them the rights and the ability to make changes that they want to make. But yeah, I think that it was so empowering being a young person and being afforded the opportunity to really like design your room. And I think I was telling you then, I decided for whatever crazy reason that I wanted all of my furniture to be chrome and glass, and I painted my room gray, and it was very like intense, very stark, very boy, very shiny. And I think I told you this back then too. My sister walked into my room after it was done and she said, "Congratulations, you live in a bank vault." But it's what I wanted.
You had a vision.
I had a vision.
All right, well, let's get into room by room. Kind of, maybe we start with the entryway, gorgeous sun-filled entryway, and what you sort of had as a vision, and then maybe a jumping off point in terms of the color, pattern, texture.
What is now our entryway or foyer was something that we inserted into the original structure, which was a screened-in porch. And originally, you walked in to the screened-in porch from the side. You had to walk through a screen-in porch to get to the front door, so the front door was not visible from the street. And that really didn't sit well with me. I like to see a front door, and I think a house needs a gracious entrance. So when we bought the house, and it had been so loved on through the years by every family who has ever lived here, every family who's ever lived in this house has stayed in this house till their children were grown and off to college, and I totally now understand why. It just has such great family energy. But when we bought the house, it had sort of like a broken tile floor, and it was a screened-in porch, what is now the entryway. And so I had, all the windows and doors custom made to fit these beautiful arches, because it's an old, 1925 stucco home with really thick walls. I put in the wood floor, and the whole palette for that room really started with kind of these great photographs that a great friend of mine named Harriet Leibowitz, who's a fine art photographer in Atlanta, made. And they're one of the first pieces of fine art photography that I have, but they're these big 4 red squares. And I had been carrying around this antique rug with me for a minute. and it had a lot of red in it. And so that really was the jumping off point. I kind of looked at those two things. I looked at all the colors in the rug, the neutrals in the rug, and then sort of like use that as the object to pull colors and patterns and textures out from there.
So yes, art and a rug. That was sort of like, it really inspired the whole space. I love that as an example because anyone can do that. And it immediately gives you direction in, how to go.
Yes, I say that all the time. So it's really important that when you start the process of designing a room, that you start with something that, number one, has real meaning to you. Not something, that you have just because you have it, but something that really speaks to who you are, and that you really want to integrate into the room, because it's much harder to integrate those meaningful things at the end. So start with those meaningful objects, and art and multicolored fabrics and rugs, those are all like very typical great jumping off points if you like those objects, or I would say love those objects, because they give you the opportunity to really look at wall coverings and paint and whatever, because you have a myriad of options when it comes to those kinds of things. You are much more limited when it comes to art and rugs and multicolored fabrics. So start with something that's you have a really limited access, a variety of, and then you can expand to those things where you have infinite possibilities.
Right. And then that entryway really flows into your living room, which you mentioned in the introduction to the book was inspired by a gorgeous screen. Tell everybody about that story, because it is a perfect example of what you're talking about.
Yeah, so I grew up with this beautiful black lacquer screen that has incredible carving on it in semi-precious stones, and it was just something that I grew up with. And my mother always taught me to sort of appreciate the difference between things that were, just made versus things that were well made versus things that were really kind of masterpieces. And it was sort of a dangerous lesson because I kind of now have a taste for masterpieces. But like the carving on the screen is just unparalleled and exceptional. And unfortunately, as more technology has entered into our lives, people are less interested in sort of carrying those skills forward, skills that require handwork and intricacy. It's much easier to be at a computer or, be on your phone. So I grew up with this screen. When my mom passed away nearly 20 years ago, I inherited that screen, and it was for me an important jumping off point because I didn't want it to be an afterthought. I wanted the room to sort of really be enveloped by it. So I made choices. One of my shagreen wall coverings, I designed wall covering and fabric and all those things, is in that room, and it serves as a perfect texture, but also a perfect backdrop for the screen, and it really sort of lets it sing.
I'm always amazed by how much a textured wall, whether that's grass cloth or your shagreen wallpaper or even just a pattern, really sets off an artwork, because you could kind of think it would be the opposite, right? Like it might distract from it, but really it creates even more of a focal point, and I don't know, what's the magic there? Like, why does that work so well?
So, the interesting thing about museums, right, is that they're generally all white, and galleries too, because the idea is that you're focused on that specific piece of art. No other living is happening in that space. But when it comes to your home, even though I still love art to be the primary layer in the space, I don't like it as an afterthought. It does need to be a room that you're also socializing in, that you're having conversations in, that you're maybe able to just spend alone time in and read a book. So, color, pattern, and texture then really become critical tools to help you get there, so that things still feel like they're in focus and they still feel like you. And this is a space that has great things that mean a lot to you, but that you can also really live your life in that space.
I mentioned before that one of the things I love about the book and your house is that you've sort of dialed up different amounts of color, pattern, and texture in each space. And in here, in the living room, you've got a little bit more texture, a little less pattern. There are a lot of neutrals, but you've got a lot of texture with the wallpaper, and you've got the leather chairs and the sofas. So talk to me about when you use which of these three elements, and I guess why you're choosing them. Is it creating a mood? Is it the coziness? Like, what's the reason behind it?
It's a great question. And, even though the book is called Color, Pattern, Texture in that sort of sequence, you can't really tackle those things individually and in sequence. They really kind of need to come together to do exactly what you've just said, which is to create the environment that you really want to create. For me, all three are necessary in every room. Even if you're a stark minimalist and you want, hardly anything in your space, color, which includes neutrals, which, white is part of that consideration as well, because there's a whole range of quote unquote whites, right? Or a maximalist, right? Who, everything should be pattern and color, but you still need texture. You still need that element to really make it feel like a home. So for me, it's really creating that overall balance. And that's such an important part about what the book is talking about. It is walking you through color separately, pattern separately, texture separately, and really sort of teaching you about each one of those elements. But at the end of the day, it's really saying, okay, now that you have the understanding, now that you have the tool set, how do we pull that together to kind of create the room that you really want to create? And I think that that's really important. And as you said, in the living room, texture comes to the forefront. Color really is more about neutrality. Pattern really is a little more maybe restrained, But in other spaces, those other elements are put together in different proportions.
One of the rooms that I was so surprised by and love is the kitchen, because most people are going to take pattern way down in the kitchen. Just because there's a lot more, there's cabinetry, there's appliances, there's countertops, so there's not as many vehicles. You, on the other hand, have gone way up on the pattern. You've brought this big wide stripe onto the wallpaper. You've got chinoiserie shades. So what was that about? What was kind of the thought process behind it? Because it makes the kitchen feel like a room in the house and not as much of a workspace, even though it is, but it feels just cozy.
Thank you. I think for me, and again, we all respond to different colors, different ways, different patterns in different ways, and different textures in different ways. For me, the kitchen is a space that's lively, and so I really want to think what is going to kind of energize that space for me and my family. And so we painted these wide, like horizontal stripes that kind of link the two sides of our kitchen that go into our breakfast room, and then the black and white chinoiserie fabric, one of the very first fabrics I ever designed, to me was a perfect, more organic complement to what is, a pretty clean, straightforward pattern. And that's the other thing that's sort of really interesting about pattern, right? Like, you can't have everything be hard lined. You can't have everything be the same scale. It's important to have a mixture of scales and to have some patterns that are softer and more organic and some that feel more like linear and geometric. Creating that balance that's right for your specific room really can kind of help support the environment that you're trying to create.
I like the idea of, in an energetic room like the kitchen, having the design also feel energetic, because I think most people would do the opposite, right? They would think, oh, I need it to feel soothing because it's always gets so crazy. But maybe then they're always at odds. So that's actually kind of a great solution almost. It's like the energy of the room should match the energy of the activity in the room.
I think so. For me, that's what works. Again, I don't want to dictate that for everybody, but if you want if your primary bedroom and your primary suite or where you go to unwind, it's the only place as a parent you can get alone time, and we all know that feeling. You want to pick, I would think, colors, patterns, textures that really kind of instantly help you transition into that lower key mood or environment. So I generally do like to kind of balance the energy of a space with what I'm injecting into it. But in the kitchen, because we do have all of that energy and liveliness with the high contrast black and white stripes and the chinoiserie. I painted the ceiling in there a really kind of soft blue. And to me, like, that helps kind of create an overall balance, because I don't want it to be, like DEFCON 10, where, we feel like a parade's about to burst into here any minute. I mean, it's always about striking that balance.
Speaking of moods, the dining room has a very moody vibe. You've got the red drapes, the deep wall color, I believe velvet chairs, and it is so enveloping. And so I would love to hear about what kind of drew the direction in there, and what kind of art pieces or fabrics inspired that space.
Great question. For me, I deliberately knew I wanted to create a dining room that felt kind of like enveloping, where conversations could linger for, a really long time. And I think all of those elements have to come together to support that. So, having sort of darker colors and low level lighting, and the chairs, which are in mohair, all of that kind of comes together to like absorb sound and invite you to stay longer, and, to really get you to relax. And, we're not having breakfast in there. We're not having lunch in there. It's for, dinners, and not even everyday dinners, but, for when we're entertaining or when we're having special occasion dinners, and those usually happen at night. So you really have to think about, like, what am I going to use this space for? What kind of environment do I want to create? And, what's going to help me feel, matched up with that environment? Because for me, these deeper colors do kind of turn the noise down a little bit. The red, I think, is a really interesting choice, because it's not bright red, it's not tomato red, it's like sort of a darker, moodier red. The camel color and the mohairs and the dark browns and the mohairs, they all make me feel like I want to stay a little bit longer. But that might not be true for somebody else. Yeah. And I think that that's really important, is to like be okay with how things impact you, and to accept it, and to then manifest it.
I love just the idea of like narrowing down to a feeling that you want to create and having that guide it, because I think many of us might find a picture that we like, or something that someone else has done, and it's easy to go to that place because it's an example, but that feeling is going to, kind of get you something more rewarding. But I love that you mentioned sound, because so few people think about the sound, and the sound in the space has such an effect on how you feel in there, and all of the, drapery and the rug, and just this, it's not a small room, but like the enclosed nature of that dining room creates this feeling that I think the sound is really important.
Oh, it's a huge factor. Anybody who has ever had to endure a meal at a restaurant without drapery, without, soft things to absorb sound, understands how difficult that is. And most of us don't want to have to struggle to communicate in our homes, or anywhere for that matter. So, I always say a room is never complete until it has, window dressing. I love drapery panels for that reason, rugs, and I think upholstery, as you were noting, is also another component. It's not just about what you see, but it's how you feel in that space, and I think sound is a huge part of that.
Yeah, I think it's something that it's easy to overlook because you can't see it. It really is a feeling. So it's, but when you're in it, you recognize the difference.
Yeah, and it's one of the big differences between looking at a beautiful picture in a magazine or a book and then actually living in the space, right? Those are two different things. You can be in the most beautiful space, but if it's not comfortable to be in, you're not going to use it. It's going to be a quick glance, and then you're going to move on.
You have a lot of dining spaces in here. In your house in general. There's a sort of I don't know if you'd call it a breakfast room. It's a gorgeous dining space off the kitchen. You've got the formal dining room, and then you also have this library room that's adjacent to the family room. So talk to me about those two spaces, the kitchen and the family room. They really flow together. I'm curious how the design was sort of meant to echo one another and also be different.
Yeah, so, you're talking about the part of the house that we are really in, and I think that, yes, I still love, and I know this is really not a popular thing to say, but I still love having a formal living room. I still love having a formal dining room. If you have the square footage, I just kind of like that function. And in this day and age where everything is open concept, to me, it's kind of nice to have spaces that feel a little more intimate. I'm introverted naturally, so maybe I feel safer in those kinds of spaces. But the kitchen and the family room are rooms that we really live in. We have 2 teenagers, we have 6 dogs, and so I really started from that place of function. How do we use these spaces? And they do visually connect, they are adjacent. So I'm a huge bookworm. Obviously, everybody's gonna see I got some books and I need some places to put them. So having what was a dining room table converted into what we call a library table for a space where the kids do their homework, where I oftentimes, for my research, designing fabric collections, wall covering collections, whatever it is that I'm researching, I love to have a space to kind of lay my books out, do my research. Yes, I am aware that there's such a thing called the internet, but I think that there's really something different about visually processing information on a screen versus in person. I still love to touch the pages of a book. As long as I'm a real person living in a real body, I want to be surrounded by real things.
There's something about the tactile nature of it, especially like a book with great imagery. It's bigger than just on your phone. Like it's a bigger image. There's a feeling to it. I'm with you. I love that.
I also think it's easier to sort of cross-reference when you have something physical and you're really engaging with it. I just think your brain processes that information in a different way. And it's a way that I personally find more helpful for my creative endeavors.
Well, I also just love how you use your books almost like accessories. They're creating levels for different beautiful sculptures. You can put a vase on them. They are there for reading, but they're also just there to kind of make everything more visually interesting.
Yeah, and I was sort of saying this to you earlier. If your life is full of books that really you love and you're not just sort of buying them for decorative purposes, but they really kind of, represent the things that you're passionate about, I think anybody who comes into your home instantly gets a special treat. When they look around at your books, they're getting to get to know you. So I really feel like they're an important part of the soul of a house. We touched upon something earlier that I think is an important statement. When it comes to like the physical nature of things, like it's fine to do those initial explorations for design purposes online. It's such an efficient tool. But keep in mind that you're still seeing things through the lens of technology, and that color that looks great on your screen could be vastly different in person. That thing that looks like completely smooth on your screen might have some really interesting texture. It's difficult to tell the scale of a pattern accurately, So, great for initial investigative work, but ultimately having real tangible things in your hands is the best way to kind of pull a room together.
And you have a section in the book about this, about ordering samples, get the sample, test out the paint, get the rug sample, all of that. So I really enjoyed that in there. And I feel like it's such an important thing. Designers, this is a designer move that anyone can do, but designers know how critical it is. So I loved calling that out.
Yeah, and so that family room, library space, it's kind of like what our version of a great room is. Again, it's where we hang out as a family. I would love to tell you that our dogs are not allowed on the sofa, but they are. And, they're covered in my performance fabrics, but I want it to be joyful. I want it to be, a place that we feel super comfortable hanging out in. And for me, the color, yellow, especially the deeper yellows, the ones that sort of verge into gold, those have always been important to me. It's an important part of my culture. Red and gold, which you'll kind of see, sprinkled throughout the house. Those are colors that I grew up with. They symbolize in my culture prosperity and health and joy and love. And so I've taken my cultural background and kind of infused it into those rooms. And so you'll see a lot more yellow and gold in that family space for that reason.
Yeah, but it also feels so light in there, and like you've got great sun coming in, and it connects really beautifully to this space that we're in out here. Kind of talk to us about this space, because it kind of is an extension off the back of the house with the kitchen and the family room. So I imagine just those two spaces become one without here during certain times of year or during parties, that kind of thing.
Yeah. My husband has never met a door that he hasn't wanted to fling open. And so, we love this connection between indoor and outdoor. It's just how we live our lives. Like, if I can have a meal outside, I'm gonna be outside. And Atlanta is such a great city for that. I mean, you can spend such a huge part of the year kind of enjoying the great outdoors. So, I really took that into consideration when thinking about the visuals between the kitchen, which is primarily, these big black and white bold stripes and this black and white chinoiserie, and kind of extending it out here. So even though these are outdoor, pieces of furniture, I still want pattern out here. You can see we got plenty of pattern. Another plug, my outdoor fabrics. We have chinoiserie on our loungers, and it's paired with something that's, bold and graphic. And for me, your outdoors is just another room. It's another room that just happens to not have walls or just happens to not have ceilings everywhere. So you should really still take into account color, pattern, and texture to kind of create a great outdoor space that you really love.
I also love how in a backyard, nature is a texture. There's so much texture already that it sort of creates that frame for you to add the color and the pattern, because you're kind of already starting ahead, right? Like you've got all the grass and the leaves and all the foliage.
Yeah, and I think that that's an important thing to take into consideration. If you have a great exterior environment, you don't want the visuals that you're inserting to be in direct competition. It needs to be a happy partnership, and you still want to think about what the primary layer is. Is nature the artwork outside? And you're designing around that.
Yeah. Well, I love the black and white with the green, because it almost emphasizes the green, and they all kind of make each other pop.
Absolutely. As you can see, every design element that you would have inside, I want to have outside too. I want to have drapes. I want to have a beautiful light fixture. I want to have sculpture. All of these things kind of really make the outdoors feel like a place that you can really spend a significant amount of time in.
Definitely. And you mentioned your performance fabrics. We live in a time where you can find all of those things that will stand up to, you can find light fixtures and drapery. So it's nice to have the options to really pull off the space that you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, we have never had more options for outdoor living than we do now. And it used to be, when you talked about, quote unquote performance fabrics, they may have looked good from 20 yards. But as you got closer, you're like, wow, that's shiny. And then you would sit on it and be like, that feels terrible. But that's not the case anymore. Yeah. My indoor sofas are covered in my indoor-outdoor fabric because it's just as soft and comfortable as, other fabric. But my kids can spill ice cream on it. My guests can spill their red wine on it. Occasionally, there might be a black Sharpie floating around that gets on it. And it all can be cleaned out. And I think that that's what we want. We want this marriage of real life and aesthetics. And we can do that now, whether it's indoors or outdoors. We can have the look that we want and still have it support the way that we live. I can't tell you how many people have kind of grown up thinking, I'm never going to be able to have a white or a cream sofa until my kids go to school or until I don't have animals or whatever. Well, I love dogs and I'm always going to have dogs. And I love the fact that now I can not just do it for me, but I can do it for my clients too, that we can have outdoor sofas, indoor sofas that are white and we don't have to be fearful of it. We know it can be cleaned.
Take us upstairs a little bit, because you have this fabulous space downstairs. We've kind of walked through the different parts of it, but I love the staircase. You've got all of your family photos displayed. I love how you've treated the different hallways like their own spaces. You know, they're not pass-throughs. They have decorative finishes. They're thoughtful. And especially that staircase. It's pretty, and it really gives you a window into your family life and your personalities.
I think that stairwell and the railings in that stairwell are one of the things that I fell in love with immediately when I first walked into this house. It's just beautiful. It's original to the 1925 house, and we love fine art. So, you know, as people tour the house, they'll be able to definitely pick up on that. We've built a fine art photography collection over several decades, and I love living with art. You know, it enriches my life. It makes me happy. I don't need it to just be reserved for a museum, and it doesn't always have to be museum quality, but it does have to mean something to you, and you do have to love it. So just like books, I think art is a wonderful way to sort of get to know the people who inhabit that house. The other thing you mentioned were the family photos, which, again, infusing your family history into a space is, I think, so important. I love photographs of family, and I know it can get unruly. People have a hard time sort of figuring out, how do I incorporate that without feeling like, you know, it's just cluttering every surface. But so I always love the idea of creating a family photo wall where, you know, I have the same sized frame for photos of various sizes and scales, and I just adjust the size of the mat to accommodate the image. So there are some frames that they're all about this big, and there are some photos that are only about this big, and some photos that are this big, and it gives it a rhythm, and it infuses a pattern just through its repetition, and it still kind of allows us to really kind of engage with our family history in a beautiful and pleasant way.
So you come up this beautiful staircase, you've got all these family photos, and then you kind of head over into the primary suite. So walk us through that, because I really loved how calming it felt. You know, there's a gorgeous color. It's hard to know, is that gray? Is that brown? What is that, like, perfect in between? And you have all these soft elements in there, the shade, the bedding, the drapery. So talk me through that, putting together a bedroom, especially a primary bedroom, because you mentioned earlier wanting it to be, you know, kind of a place where you can unwind.
When you're designing other spaces like living spaces, family spaces, dining spaces, you know, I always say take into consideration the viewpoints and the feelings and the preferences of everybody who like really inhabits that space. So those spaces really require a lot of input. You know, I can't just selfishly say, oh, I love this color, we're gonna make the family room this color. It's important for all of us to feel like we've chimed in, that we've been heard. And so those spaces tend to be more or less like public spaces. It's where your friends come over to be entertained, or where you know, invite outsiders into your home. Your bedroom is a different story, right? This is where it's just you or you and your partner really kind of drilling down on what makes you happy, or what gets you to the end goal, which is usually, the end goal is usually to have rest, to be at peace. You know, I'm not gonna say that's everybody's end goal for a primary, but that's usually the end goal. And that means different things for different people. It means different things for every couple. I remember for years, I got my start on television on a show called Trading Spaces, and we would meet husbands and wives typically for an interview. And a really popular saying a long time ago was, you know, happy wife, happy life. It's such a dangerous statement, actually, because I think back then, at least, a lot of men felt like, I'm just gonna leave the decor and the design up to her. It's not worth the fight. It's not worth my input. I could care less. But the truth is, like, men really do care. You know, if a female partner says, you know what, I wanna be ensconced in pink and lavender and florals for all the bedding and the walls, he might say happy wife, happy life, but at the end of the day, that's gonna begin to wear on him if he actually doesn't like pink and he actually doesn't like florals. And this is where he goes to spend a third of his life. I think it's really important for everybody who's using a space to actively chime in, and for us to then find what that compromise position that makes us both happy. And in our room, you know, it really did result in kind of a moodier, kind of, as you said, a cross between gray and brown. And I love that color because there's nothing that you can put in the space that, you know, it won't go with. And you'll notice there's like a antique Bokhara rug in there, and it's got a lot of the red. So, you know, like red is kind of like a theme throughout the house, and you'll see it infused in different spaces, especially on the floor. And it's just full of things that we've kind of collected on our travels. And that's true for the rest of the house too. You know, things that have meaning for us. And surprise, surprise, there's stacks of books, there's fine art photography, but it's a place that we can really go to unwind and relax. Our lives are so busy, and you should never be in the position of thinking when you're in a really nice posh hotel, or if you've ever had a chance to really spend some time, like, you know, a special anniversary at a beautiful resort, that, oh, I wish my room felt more like this. If you're feeling like that, then you need to actively do something to work towards getting there, because your primary bedroom, your primary bathroom, they should feel just as wonderful, if not more so, than any resort or hotel.
Well, you talk about this in your second book, Vacation at Home, which was perfectly timed for COVID.
Yes.
You really did something in the universe.
Yeah, I know, because we had this whole book tour with Ballard Designs. I was going to like travel the country in 2020 and sign books at all the different Ballard Designs. And we had our first event in Atlanta, and then we kept pushing the dates off because we're like, I don't know if it's safe for us to gather. But yes, it was the perfect opportunity for people to really kind of work on their homes. Yeah. And I do think that that is super important. And I had been that person who was like in beautiful hotel and resort bathrooms thinking like, oh, this is so much nicer than my bathroom. And I got really tired of that feeling. Yeah. Like, I spend more time in my primary bathroom than I do in a hotel bathroom. So why shouldn't my bathroom be just as restorative and joyful? And you'll notice that in the primary bathroom, you know, there are still things from our travels. You know, it doesn't have to just feel utilitarian. It can still feel like an extension of your house.
People always say, I wish my house felt like a hotel or a spa. And I do understand the sentiment of that. But also those places are intentionally like devoid of personality. Absolutely,
because that's the goal, is you're not designing it for a specific person. You're designing it to be kind of generally palatable for a wide range of people. And you're right, the sentiment is that, oh, it's somehow more peaceful, or it's somehow more enjoyable. And so you just have to think, well, how do I create that peace? How do I create that enjoyment in my own house? And that is so often color, pattern, and texture, just getting it right. That's why your home should be ultimately the most comfortable place, because you aren't having to cater to everybody.
Yeah. Well, I like what you mentioned about making sure the design is appealing and comfortable for everyone in the family. And your book does this so beautifully, but like there are, and again, back to like the options we have now, there are so many options that maybe you like a floral, you know, the wife likes a floral and she can use that as the pattern, but then maybe the color and the texture can play to the other members of the family. So I think there are ways to pull off certain things that one person might like, but then balance them with the other. And I love that point.
That is so true. It's like a Venn diagram, you know, for those of you who don't remember Venn diagrams, it's, you know, where the circle that represents one person and the circle that represents the other person, where do those overlap? Like, what is the commonality that we can use as a jumping off point? It doesn't mean that every single element in every single space has to get a check mark from everybody who uses it, right. But it means that there's an opportunity to create compromise and to create balance so that everybody using a space can walk in and say, oh, I feel heard. Mm-hmm. You know, I had input and I feel comfortable in this space. And ultimately, a lot of it just does boil down to respect, having respect for each other. having respect that we're individuals and we're not going to always see everything eye to eye, but that's okay. But what's not okay oftentimes, and what oftentimes results in things falling apart, is when somebody says it's my way or the highway. And that's usually not very healthy for a home.
And, you know, sometimes it's those opposites, a floral drapery panel with a leather chair, and they make each other better, right? So being respectful of the other person might actually make that floral pink thing look even better than if you'd added more floral and pink. So
You hit upon such a great point. We talk about this in the texture section of the book a lot, but contrasting elements are each other's best friends. If you have a room that's completely full of smooth, polished things, none of those things stands out and can be appreciated. If you have a room that's full of just pattern with nothing solid as a backdrop, it's going to be so difficult to appreciate and understand any of those patterns. So it is about balancing smooth things with rough things, pattern things with solid things, colorful things with things that feel a little more neutral. You know, so when you kind of create that balance, each one of those elements all of a sudden has an opportunity to step to the forefront.
well, thank you for having us. It's beautiful to see the space. I loved getting to see your home within the context of the book, because you have used all of these, you know, the 3 color pattern texture, the title of the book, expertly inside, and it's a perfect example of everything you talk about in the book.
My gosh, you're too kind. No, I always say the best invitation to get is an invitation to somebody's house, because if they've done it correctly, it's an invitation to get to know them. So hopefully, you and everybody who's watching this house tour today feels like they're getting to know me a little bit better.
You just have such a gorgeous space, and, you know, it's a treat to get to share it with everybody.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
For more conversations like this one, be sure to subscribe to both the Ballard Designs podcast, How to Decorate, and our YouTube channel for more house tours.